You're good to go.
Okay, great. So we've got the all clear. Let's go ahead and get started. We'll call the case of United States versus Kara Bassett. My name is Judge Mundell. For scoring judges, if you could just make sure, it looks like everybody's got this checked, but the two buttons on the lower left side of the screen, the mute button and the stop video button, make sure you turn off your video and audio for the duration of the trial. And then after that, you can go ahead and pop back up. Also make sure, folks, to have your settings set to hide non-video participants, which will help your screen look less crowded. So the only people that you should be seeing on the screen right now are our two advocates and then me. So it looks like everybody's in a good place. Can we have our attorneys make their appearances for the record, please?
Introductions from the people, Your Honor.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Brooke Nunes, representing the people of the United States in today's case. Today, I'm joined by my co-counsel, Leah Parial.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Who will be assisting me with the technical aspects of today's trial.
And for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Victoria Smith, and today I am representing Kara Bassett, along with my co-counsel, Elizabeth Kelly.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
And Your Honor, before proceeding, the people have a few preliminary matters to take care of.
Please.
First, we would like to alert the court's attention to Rule 615 and ask that all witnesses are considered constructively sequestered at this time.
Any objections from the defense?
None, Your Honor.
And will the defense be designating a representative under 615 or?
No, Your Honor.
All right, very well.
Your Honor, leading with that point, because the defense has not brought Kara Bassett to court today, there's no need to identify the defendant.
And that's your understanding too, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. Anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. I would like to direct the court's attention to Evidentiary Ruling 7, which states that Exhibits 4 through 33 are pre-marked and admitted into evidence.
Yes, I recognize that ruling. Thank you.
And finally, Your Honor, if at any time you can't hear or see us, please just let us know.
You got it.
And with that, the people are ready to proceed.
And anything from the defense?
No, Your Honor. We are ready to proceed as well.
All right, well, we're going to hear opening statements then. Before we do that, let's just make sure everyone's in speaker view, which basically means click that button on the top right-hand corner of your screen. And attorneys, please make sure you mute your audio while your opposing counsel is speaking. Whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Dawn Clark was the only thing that stood in her way. On one side, you have a zoo where money is the goal. On the other, a sanctuary where protecting elephants is the only priority. On one side, Dawn Clark is in charge. On the other, Ms. Bassett always gets her way. Members of the jury, on one side, what she had. On the other, what she wanted. Dawn Clark was the only thing that stood in her way. Today, the people have charged Ms. Bassett with murder. And in bringing this charge, we fully accept that we have the highest burden in our legal system. A burden to prove every element of this charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, members of the jury, to meet our burden, we'll call Agent Steph Branham to the stand. When Agent Branham is testifying, I want you to listen for three things: a syringe, a swamp, and a car. First, a syringe of the lethal drug carfentanil. Now, even though the defendant kept detailed logs of this drug, one is missing, and no one, not the defendant, can tell you where it is. Why? Because the evidence will show on the night of August 18th, Ms. Bassett used that syringe to kill her husband. And next, a car. Dawn Clark Chevrolet found at the Belle Leon airport with nothing but a GPS and algae inside. Agent Branham will testify that this algae linked the car to the place where Don Clark's body is. And lastly, a swamp. A big gum swamp located just 5 miles outside of the defendant's home, with nothing but algae. Members of the jury, today the evidence will show that algae was found in Don Clark's car, Big Gum Swamp, and the defendant's boots. Today you'll also hear from the defense's own witness, who will tell you the only time Ms. Bassett got what she wanted was when Don Clark disappeared. And by the end of this trial, it will be apparent that we have met our burden, because the evidence will show all Ms. Bassett wanted was for her park to be a sanctuary. The only problem? Her husband. So on the night of August 18th, Ms. Bassett killed her husband because Don Clark was the only thing that stood in her way. Which is why, at the end of this trial, I'll stand right here and ask for a verdict of guilty.
Thank you, counsel. Let's hear opening statement from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Yes, Your Honor. Don Clark is missing. So is the government's evidence. It's August 19th, 2017. Kara Bassett wakes up to see that her husband, Don Clark, is missing. She checks her phone and she sees a text that he sent the night before. It says that he's going out for a while. So she believes the text and she goes on about her day, tending to the elephant park which she runs. But as the days go on and her husband doesn't return home, Kara Bassett begins to worry. She begins to wonder, where is her husband? So she calls the police and they begin an investigation. But to Kara Bassett's surprise, they don't find her husband. Instead, they arrest her for his murder. Now, members of the jury, the government did this even though they are missing alibis from several suspects. They are missing physical evidence, and they are missing Don Clark. And if there is evidence missing, my client can't be guilty. Today, you'll hear from two witnesses, Agent Steph Branham and Joe Young. Make sure you listen to everything that they can't tell you, everything that will be missing from their testimonies. The first witness you'll hear from today is Agent Branham, who you know to be the lead investigator on the case of Don Clark's disappearance. And today, Agent Branham will tell you all about that investigation and how it was concluded that Kara Bassett murdered Don Clark. But members of the jury, they won't be able to answer key questions. They won't be able to tell you why there's no physical evidence in the Big Gum Swamp. They won't be able to tell you why there was no investigation of Costa Rica. And they won't be able to tell you where Don Clark is, because there's too much missing from their investigation. The second witness you'll hear from today is Joe Young, the film producer who worked on filming Kara Bassett for an elephant sanctuary documentary. Today, you will learn from Mr. Young that Kara Bassett and Don Clark were happily married. She loved her husband. And of course, they had a few arguments, but nothing to the point of murder. But today, you will also hear from Mr. Young about Lisa Clark, Mr. Clark's ex-wife, who would come by the park and would be threatening. But she was never investigated. She was completely missing from the government's picture. Now the government has the burden of proof today. They must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Kara Bassett murdered Dawn Clark with malice aforethought. But the government won't be able to meet that burden. They can't when they are lacking details. They can't when they are missing evidence. At the end of today's trial, I will come before you one last time and ask you to deliver a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Government, before you call your first witness, let's just make sure that everybody switches to gallery view. And when you're ready, please proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the people would like to call Agent Steph Branham to the stand.
Agent Branham, I presume you've been previously sworn, unless
Yes,
the bailiff's about to do that.
Good afternoon, Agent Branham.
Oh, good afternoon.
Agent Branham, how are you involved in today's case?
Well, I'm a senior special agent at the FBI's Violent Crimes Unit in Jacksonville and have been for 18 years. And I was the lead investigator on the Dawn Clark's missing person case.
I want to talk to you about the FBI's investigation in today's case. What, if any, key pieces of evidence did you find?
Well, there were multiple avenues of investigation that we went down when it came to Dawn's case, and that included a syringe, a car, a swamp, and a car.
Well, let's talk about these things, starting with the syringe, directing your attention to what has been previously admitted into evidence as Exhibits 17 and 18. Detective, what are these?
Well, Exhibit 17 is the material safety sheet for carfentanil, and Exhibit 18 is a syringe of carfentanil, a Schedule II powerful sedative.
And Agent, why was carfentanil important in today's case?
Well, the drug was used to sedate elephants of several thousand pounds that lived in the elephant park, and the drug is fatal to humans at 1 milligram.
Through your investigation, were you able to determine how the park administered this drug?
Well, yes, they used it for medical purposes on the elephants, and they had a logbook in order to keep track of their uses of the drug.
Directing your attention to what has been previously admitted as Exhibit 19. Agent, what is this?
Well, Exhibit 19 is a logbook that we used to determine who used the syringes. We determined that one syringe was missing, and the defendant was the last person to access this log.
And moving on, I want to talk to you about your next significant finding, the car. Directing your attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 26. Agent, what is this?
Yes, Exhibit 26 is a picture of Dawn Clark's Chevy Express van, which it was found located at Carabel Leon Airport on August 25th.
And Agent, when you found this, did your team investigate the inside?
Yes, we did investigate the van. We found that the van had a GPS device that tracked its movements, and we also found traces of forensic evidence in the van.
Let's talk about that forensic evidence today. At any time, did you send samples to a lab for further investigation?
Yes, ma'am. We sent muddy samples from the van pedals and the driver's side floor to a lab that had compared items from Ms. Bassett and the van to samples taken from Big Gum Swamp.
Now I want to talk to you about the specific forensic report you received, directing your attention to Exhibit 5. Is this an accurate depiction of the report you received?
Yes, it is, ma'am. What it appears to me.
Ms. Parial, if we could put Exhibit 5 on the screen.
Of course.
Agent, from the samples you took and gave to the lab, what did you conclude?
Well, we took samples from the van, some of Bassett's personal items, and from Big Gum Swamp. We were able to compare them. We found unique algae that is unique to the swamp on those of Bassett's personal items and within the van.
Now I want to talk to you specifically about the swamp you mentioned, directing your attention to what has been previously marked and admitted into evidence as Exhibit 28.
Yes, ma'am.
What is this?
Well, this is a picture of Big Gum Swamp. It's a
Thank you.
13,000-acre freshwater swamp that has alligators in it.
I'm sorry, Agent. Did you get to finish your answer?
Yes, I did. That's exactly what the swamp is. We did investigate the swamp.
Now, Agent, why did you decide to go to the swamp in today's case?
Well, we looked at the GPS records that we found within the van, and we were able to determine that the van traveled to that swamp on the night of Don Clark's disappearance.
Were you able to find any evidence that linked Miss Bassett to the swamp?
Well, yes, we were. We were, as I talked about before, about those forensic tests that we took. On Bassett's personal items, which were her boots and a wheelchair from the park, we were able to find that specific algae that is unique to Big Gum Swamp.
And is it possible Miss Bassett went to the swamp on another day?
Well, I did an interview with Miss Bassett, and she said that she had never seen or traveled to this swamp previously.
Finally, Agent, I want to talk to you a little bit more about Kara Bassett's elephant park. At any time in your investigation, did you talk to the defendant?
I did. I just talked about an interview that I had with her.
And did she tell you about what she wanted her elephant park to be?
Yes, she wanted it to be an elephant sanctuary, but Mr. Clark ran it more as a business for the public.
I want to direct your attention to what has been previously admitted into evidence as Exhibit 15. Agent, what is this?
Well, Exhibit 15 is a power of attorney document. It gave Kara Bassett total control of Don's assets, which was about $8 million, and the elephant park in the event of his death or disappearance.
To the best of your knowledge, how did Miss Bassett's park change when her husband disappeared?
Well, after Don's disappearance, it changed from Don's business to a sanctuary.
Thank you, Agent Branham. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Agent Branham. Now, you were the lead investigator on Don Clark's case.
Yes, ma'am?
You ruled it was a homicide.
Yes.
And you ruled that Kara Bassett murdered Don Clark?
That's what the evidence pointed to, yes.
I want to talk about that, but first, let's discuss your investigation. You investigated the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park?
Yes, ma'am.
And this was a thorough search.
Yes.
But you never found Don Clark's body there.
No, ma'am.
Because you believe his body was moved?
Well, the evidence pointed to that.
Right, you believe that it was moved to the Big Gum Swamp.
I didn't make any assumptions without evidence, ma'am.
But you believe it was moved to the Big Gum Swamp?
Yes.
Miss Kelly, could you please pull up that previously admitted photograph of the swamp? So this is the Big Gum Swamp.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is where you believe the body was dumped.
Yes.
And your theory is that Kara Bassett moved Don Clark
Yes.
by herself
Yes, ma'am.
through this swamp.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Kara Bassett is only 5'4",
Yes.
and Don Clark is 6'5".
That is correct.
But then you searched the swamp,
We did, yes.
and that was a thorough search.
Well, yes.
And you even brought along trained dogs that had Mr. Clark's scent.
Yes, ma'am.
You never found Don Clark's body.
That is correct.
So you believe that Kara Bassett somehow got his body deep enough in the swamp where it couldn't be seen?
Well, ma'am, it is a 13,000-acre swamp, and there are alligators.
Right. So you believe that she walked through a swamp with alligators with Don Clark's body?
Well, ma'am, we found a wheelchair with algae from Big Gum Swamp.
But you still can't find Don Clark's body.
That is correct.
Now, I want to talk to you about another piece of your investigation. You're aware that Mr. Clark had a home in Costa Rica
Yes, ma'am.
that he would go to often.
Yes.
But you believe that Don Clark isn't in Costa Rica.
Well, there's no evidence that he is, ma'am.
Is that a yes? You believe he's not in Costa Rica?
Yes, the evidence doesn't point to that, ma'am.
Right, you're going off evidence you received from Costa Rican police.
Yes.
But Agent Branham, you can't tell us the names of those Costa Rican police.
Well, ma'am, we don't really talk in names. We talk interrelationships with our investigation. We don't really get to know each other.
You can't tell us what search methods they used.
Well, no, ma'am, but I trust they know what they're doing.
You can't tell us how thorough they were.
Do you mind repeating that, ma'am? I'm sorry.
Of course. You can't tell us how thorough they were.
Well, no, ma'am.
And you can't tell us that they are correct.
Well, I can tell you that the evidence that they gave me, that's all I can testify to, and that's what they said.
Now, I want to talk about carfentanil. You believe that that's the murder weapon in today's case?
Once again, that's what the evidence points to, ma'am.
And of course, Kara Bassett has access to that carfentanil.
Yes, along with other members of the park.
Let's talk about that. Ms. Kelly, could you please pull up Exhibit 19? Now, this is the log of who had access to the carfentanil.
Yes, ma'am.
And according to this log, several other people had access to it.
Yes.
And you interviewed all the park employees at the elephant park?
Yes, ma'am.
2 park employees couldn't provide you with an alibi.
That is correct, ma'am.
You also didn't receive an alibi from Phil Clark, Mr. Clark's son.
That's right, ma'am.
And you also didn't receive an alibi from Lisa Clark. Is that true?
Well, that is correct, ma'am. She did not cooperate with our investigation.
Let's discuss that. Ms. Kelly, could you please pull up previously admitted Exhibit 4? Now, this is a letter that was written to you.
Yes, ma'am.
From Don Clark's lawyer, right?
That is correct.
And in this letter, you learned about Lisa Clark.
Yes, ma'am.
And you learned she was threatening.
Well, yes, ma'am.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Sorry, I had muted myself. You may.
Your Honor, this is simply testimony from a previously admitted exhibit, and as this witness is able to testify to something that is already admitted into evidence, there is no issue of character evidence.
Your
Yeah,
Honor,
counsel-
if I may be heard.
Sure.
I'm not objecting to this document itself. I'm objecting to the statement that Miss Clark is a threatening person. That is character evidence, and it's not dependent on this document. It's simply the witness testifying that Miss Clark is a threatening individual.
I thought, defense counsel, you're going to have to just walk it back for a moment. Was your question about this particular document
Yes,
with respect to that statement?
yes.
In that sense, if that is the question, I'm going to make sure that the answer is limited to that. I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Agent Branham, according to this document, Lisa Clark had been threatening.
Yes, but this document also said that they were meritless, ma'am.
Right, and this document also showed that Mr. Clark thought about filing a restraining order against Lisa Clark.
Yes, ma'am.
But you never talked to Lisa Clark.
I did talk to Lisa Clark. She did not agree to cooperate with our investigation.
You didn't deem Lisa Clark as a suspect.
Well, ma'am, she would not cooperate with our investigation.
Right, you never investigated Lisa Clark.
Well, I called her and I visited her home in Orlando, ma'am.
But she couldn't provide you with an alibi.
Well, her phone, well, pardon me. Well, no, she did not agree to cooperate. So that's a yes to your question.
Now, I want to go back to those conclusions you mentioned earlier and how the evidence led you to arrest Kara Bassett. After finding no eyewitnesses, you still arrested Kara Bassett.
Yes, ma'am.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation. If I may be heard.
Please.
I don't believe this witness has testified that no eyewitnesses were found in today's case. This foundation would have to be laid in order for this witness to answer the question.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
This is cross-examination. I'm simply asking the witness about something that is in her testimony.
I'm going to allow it. It's cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
So to be clear, after finding no eyewitnesses, you still arrested Kara Bassett.
Yes, ma'am.
After never going to Costa Rica, you still arrested Kara Bassett.
Well, I never traveled to Costa Rica, but I did communicate with Costa Rican police, ma'am.
After not receiving several alibis, you still arrested Kara Bassett.
That is correct, ma'am.
And after never finding Don Clark's body, you still arrested Kara Bassett.
The evidence pointed to Kara Bassett, ma'am.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, but before redirect, we would like to respectfully ask for a time check.
Please.
You have 3 minutes and 8 seconds left on direct examination.
Thank you. Agent Branham, I want to talk to you about something opposing counsel brought up on cross-examination. After not receiving alibis, you arrested Miss Bassett. Do you remember opposing counsel asking you this?
I do, ma'am.
And opposing counsel talked to you about the alibis of 2 employees. Agent Branham, why didn't you view them as suspects?
Well, ma'am, they had no motive to commit this crime, so I eliminated them.
And Agent Branham, why didn't you view Lisa Clark as a suspect?
Well, Lisa Clark did not cooperate with our investigation, and I did investigate, and I found that she was in Orlando at the time of the event.
And Agent Branham, why didn't you view Phil Clark as a suspect?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that? My audio cut out for a minute.
Why don't you view Phil Clark as a suspect?
Well, once again, ma'am, he didn't have any motive to commit this crime.
But Agent Branham, why do you view Miss Bassett as a suspect?
Well, during the course of my investigation, I found evidence that pointed to her being guilty of this crime.
Thank you, Agent Branham. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions. If there's no recross, may this witness please be excused.
Any recross, counsel?
No recross, Your Honor.
Agent, you are excused. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
And Your Honor, with that, the people rest.
Wonderful. Defense, do you have a case to put on?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Joe Young to the stand.
Mr. Young, you've been previously sworn. And you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joe Young, and I'm a documentary producer.
Mr. Young, do you know Kara Bassett?
Oh, Kara? Oh, I've known her for several years now. I actually did a documentary with her called Elephant Queen.
When did you start working on that documentary with her?
Well, it's been about 5 years now, so we started in 2015.
And how did you come to start working on that?
Well, Mrs. Bassett reached out to me, and she told me that she had a really cool elephant park where she keeps all these elephants, and she wanted me to tell a story about her life and her day-to-day interactions that she would have at the park. So I agreed to help tell her story.
How often did you film at the park?
Oh, ma'am, I almost lived at that park. I was there 5 days a week, 8 hours a day for 3 years.
Did you see Kara Bassett and Don Clark ever interact?
Every day, I basically follow Kara everywhere. Kara feeding the elephants, Kara dealing with different business partners, Kara talking to her husband, Don. I really was there for every step of the way.
And from what you saw, how did you perceive her relationship with Don Clark?
Well, Kara and Don got along just fine. Like any couple, they were able to work things out between them. They were really quite a great team.
And did you ever see Kara Bassett physically hurt Don Clark?
Hurt him? Oh, absolutely not, ma'am.
Now, do you know someone named Lisa Clark?
Ooh, I do, ma'am. That's Don Clark's ex-wife. Quite the person there.
Did you ever see her come by the elephant park?
Several occasions, yes. She would come to the park yelling and screaming at Don. It was really intense.
What would she scream at Don?
Well, a large variety of things. Some of them I'm not permitted to say, but I do remember her saying to Don Clark, she screamed at him, "I'm gonna wipe you off the face of the earth."
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay?
Your Honor, yes, Your Honor. This is an excited utterance.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yes.
If this is coming under excited utterance, I ask to move my objection to lack of foundation. Opposing counsel has not laid any foundation as to the situation that was going on that caused this statement to be made, and therefore we do not know if this was made as an excited utterance.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Mr. Young just testified as to the fact that Lisa Clark would come over to the park and she would be screaming and shouting at Dawn, which would fall under an excited utterance.
I'm going to sustain the objection if that's the exception. Feel free to lay more foundation. Yes, the comment's stricken.
From what you perceived, Mr. Young, did Lisa Clark and Dawn Clark have a good relationship?
Oh, from what I perceived, they had a terrible relationship. I remember Lisa Clark would come to the park yelling and screaming at her husband multiple occasions. One time it got so bad they had to call the police.
Now, I want to talk about the events leading up to Mr. Clark's disappearance. Do you remember the last day you saw him?
Oh, I'll never forget it. I was working at the park that day, August 18th.
And how was that interaction?
Well, it started off like any other conversation I was having with Don. It was 6 o'clock that night. We were just talking to him about my upcoming trip to Mexico. And I remember all of a sudden, Don Clark looked down at his phone and his face just went white with fear.
And what happened after you saw his face go white?
Well, he just said, "Oh, I have to go deal with this." And he just walked off. I never saw him again.
Did you ever talk to the FBI about Dawn Clark's disappearance?
Barely, ma'am. When I returned to the park after my little vacation to Mexico, the FBI only asked me like 3 questions.
Did they ever ask to see your video footage of Kara Bassett?
They never did. And that's what shocks me the most, because I had 2,000 hours of comedy gold. But no, they never asked me for any of it.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about Don. Did Don spend all his time at the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park?
No, he didn't. I learned throughout my time at the park that Don really liked to go party in Costa Rica. He would go to his vacation home every 2 months.
And did you ever go to Costa Rica with Mr. Clark?
I never went with him, but I actually did a little investigation after Mr. Clark disappeared, and at that point I did go to his vacation home.
And when you went to his vacation home, what did you find?
Well, as I said, I was doing a little solo investigation. So as a part of that, I snuck into Mr. Clark's vacation home in Costa Rica. And it was there that I found his place was spotless. There was no dust, and I saw a fan was on in the house. And in addition to that, I saw all of Don's clothes were in the closet when I walked in.
And when exactly were you at his home?
I went to his house in June of 2018.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Young.
Good afternoon.
My name is Brooke Nunes, and if at any time you can't hear or see me, please just let me know.
All right, got it.
On direct examination, you spoke to opposing counsel a lot about Dawn Clark's ex-wife, Lisa. I want to talk to you about Lisa a little bit more today. Now, Mr. Young, you remember a time when Ms. Bassett threw a vase at her husband, correct?
Oh, I do.
What's your objection?
This is unfairly prejudicial and
Counsel,
also improper character evidence. My apologies, Your Honor. There was a glitch.
No worries. Counsel, do you have a response?
Your Honor, at first I ask which objection opposing counsel is making to this statement.
Your Honor, I'm making both.
I think it's the prejudicial versus probative and the character evidence.
Yes, Your Honor. First, prejudicial versus probative means that the probative value of the evidence largely is outweighed by its prejudice on the jury. In today's case, the fact that Ms. Bassett picked up a vase and threw it at her husband is incredibly probative because it shows Ms. Bassett had the tendencies to be violent with her husband. Today, Ms. Bassett is on trial for murder, which it's the people's contention is a violent crime. This simply shows that Ms. Bassett had the motive and opportunity to kill her husband.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Just a moment. Is that also your response to the character objection, counsel, or was that just your response on
And
the?
Your Honor, as to character evidence, we're bringing it in to prove Ms. Bassett's motive to killing her husband.
Your response, counsel?
Your Honor, this is still improper character evidence as it is being used to show a violent act in the past, and it is showing that in the future she could have acted that same way. And if it isn't actually going to motive, as opposing counsel is saying, it's actually going to prove that one action in the past can show it would happen again.
Counsel, yes, so, Attorney Nunes, how is this not propensity evidence? Why is this evidence of motive?
Yes, Your Honor, because in today's case, it's the people's contention that because Ms. Bassett was increasingly getting angry at her husband, that she had the motive to kill her husband on the night of August 18th. I can lay foundation as to the dynamic of the situation that led to this vase being thrown, if necessary.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Briefly.
Yes, Your Honor. This would then go back to the unfairly prejudicial objection, as a vase being thrown at her husband is not something that needs to be shown to the jury, whereas they could just lay the foundation that they had problems in their relationship. They don't need that testimony of a violent image.
I think it's a fine line. I'm going to sustain the objection, but I suspect that the foundational testimony, counsel, that you were referring to might help you
Yes,
get
Your
at some of that information.
Move to strike that line of questioning.
If there was any answer given, it'll be stricken.
Mr. Young, Ms. Bassett and her husband argued about turning the elephant park into a sanctuary, correct?
Yeah, they had a few arguments.
And I want to make something clear. Mr. Young, if Don Clark disappeared, Ms. Bassett would get all of his money.
I think that's the case.
But I want to make something else clear. If Don Clark disappeared, Lisa Clark wouldn't get all of his money.
I don't believe so. No, ma'am.
Now, moving on, I want to talk to you about Ms. Bassett and her elephant park. Ms. Bassett was passionate about elephants.
Oh, yes. She really lived for those elephants, and it was really her vision that I wanted to capture in our documentary.
She wanted to protect elephants.
Oh, yes. I would certainly agree with that. She was quite the conservationalist.
And she wanted a place where other people were interested in protecting elephants.
Could you repeat that question, please?
Yes, Mr. Young. Ms. Bassett wanted to create a place where other people could be passionate about protecting elephants.
Yes, I would agree with that.
I want to talk to you about the changes you saw in the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park. Now, when Don Clark was alive, the elephants were in cages.
Yes, that's correct. Whenever the elephants weren't out and about, they would be in cages. That's where they slept and everything like that.
But when he disappeared, this was no longer the case.
No, after that, Mrs. Bassett changed it so the elephants could just walk around the property.
And when Don Clark was alive, the park paid its staff.
As far as I'm aware, I was a staff member, so I believe the other members were getting paid as well.
But when Don Clark died, the staff were volunteers.
Oh, yes. Kara changed it to a nonprofit organization, so all of the workers at the park were then volunteers. But believe it or not, the park actually ended up making more money after we turned to a nonprofit.
And when Don Clark was alive, people were allowed to approach elephants closely.
That's correct, yes.
But when he died, this was no longer the case.
Yes, because as you mentioned, the elephants weren't in cages, so it wouldn't be as safe to have people come super close to them.
So, Mr. Young, to clarify, when Don Clark was alive, the park was a business.
Well, it was not a nonprofit like Mrs. Bassett had it when she was running it. Yes.
But when he disappeared, it was Miss Bassett's sanctuary.
It belonged to Mrs. Bassett after he disappeared. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Counsel, do you have a redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Mr. Young, on cross-examination, you were asked a lot about what happened to the elephant after Mr. Clark disappeared. But I want to talk about Miss Bassett. What was her reaction when her husband disappeared?
Oh, it was tough to watch. It was hard to keep filming that. Uh, she was just confused and depressed. I tried to help comfort her, tell her it was all
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation as to depressed. If I
You
may
want to
be heard.
respond? Sure, you can elaborate.
Your Honor, being depressed is a mental state. Mr. Young would have absolutely no clue as to the background that would go into diagnosing Miss Bassett as depressed.
Counsel, do you wish to respond?
Yes, Your Honor. This is simply the rational perception of Mr. Young, what he personally perceived and observed Mrs. Bassett to have.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Young, could you please continue explaining what you saw Miss Bassett act like after Mr. Clark disappeared?
Certainly, ma'am. I remember she seemed very upset about it, and it took her a while to get over it, but I tried to help comfort her and help bring things back to normal as much as we possibly could.
And from your observations, what was the state of Kara Bassett and Don Clark's relationship when he disappeared?
To me, everything seemed peachy. I remember the day they left, they were talking between the two of them, and it was just like normal Kara and Don.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
And any recross?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. And before proceeding with recross, I respectfully ask for a time check.
Of course.
I have 3 minutes and 47 seconds remaining for cross-exam.
Thank you. Mr. Young, on redirect examination, opposing counsel mentioned something, and I just want to make sure I got it right. You mentioned to opposing counsel that it took Miss Bassett a while to get over Don Clark's disappearance.
Yes, it did.
And Mr. Young, to clarify, it took Miss Bassett about a week to get over her husband's disappearance.
No, ma'am. I remember she was confused and anxious for weeks after that time.
And I want to recall what you were doing in that time. Miss Bassett told you to not turn off the cameras.
No, Kara is a really strong person. She knew that the message we were delivering to the people was important. So she didn't want to let her personal, her personal life get in the way of that. So it was...
Mr. Young, so she wanted the world to see her sad.
Yes, she did. She wanted to tell
Wanted the world to see her depressed.
She never said that in particular.
She wanted the world to see her grieving.
Well, she wanted the world to see her grief. Yes, she wanted to tell this story as it is. She didn't want to just make it all sunshine and rainbows. She wanted to make the story about this elephant park real.
So, Mr. Young, to clarify, when Don Clark went missing, Miss Bassett wanted the world to see her sad.
Yes, she did. She wanted to keep going with the documentary.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, Mr. Young, I think you can be excused. And anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor. The defense rests.
All right, in that case, we'll proceed to closing arguments. And before we do, we're going to switch to speaker view. For those scoring, by the way, if you want to go ahead and complete the witness portion of the scoring ballot, that's also fine. But otherwise, counsel for the prosecution, we're ready when you are.
Yes, Your Honor. She wanted the world to see her grieve. And that's what Mr. Young told you on the stand just now. And because when Don Clark went missing, Miss Bassett wasn't concerned about him coming back. He wasn't concerned about finding him. Miss Bassett was concerned about the world seeing her grieve. Why? Because after Don Clark went missing, Miss Bassett put on an act. She wanted the world to see her sad. She wanted people to think she was innocent. But members of the jury, today, that's when that stops. Because at the end of this trial, it's apparent that Dawn Clark was the only thing that stood in her way. So on the night of August 18th, Miss Bassett killed her husband, dumped his body in the swamp, and hoped he would never be found again. And then she wanted the world to see her grieve. Today, the people have charged Miss Bassett with murder. And in bringing this charge, we know we have the highest burden in our legal system to prove every element of this charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, members of the jury, at the beginning of this trial, I told you we would meet this burden beyond a reasonable doubt. And after reviewing all the evidence in today's case, it is apparent that we have done so. Now, to meet this burden, we had to answer two things: that Ms. Bassett killed her husband and did so with malice aforethought. Let's start with that first point, that Ms. Bassett killed her husband. Recall Agent Steph Braham took the stand today. When Agent Braham was testifying, I told you to listen for three things: a syringe, a car, and a swamp. First, a syringe of the lethal drug carfentanil, enough to kill a human. Now, what the defense didn't tell you today was that Ms. Bassett was the last person to use that drug. And Ms. Bassett can't tell you where the one missing syringe is. Why? Because on the night of August 18th, Ms. Bassett used that syringe to kill her husband. Next, a car. Agent Braham told you this car was found at the Belle Leon airport with nothing but a GPS and algae. And members of the jury, that algae is the very thing that's connecting the car to the swamp and the swamp to Ms. Bassett. Because today, Agent Brandon told you that on the bottom of Ms. Bassett's boots, there was algae. The same algae that was in Big Gum Swamp and Dawn Clark's car. Next, Ms. Bassett killed her husband with malice aforethought. Now, today the defense came here and told you it could have been Saba Grandi, it could have been Nate Garson, it could have been Phil Clark, it could have been Lisa. But members of the jury, it's important to recognize they didn't have a motive. They weren't getting Dawn Clark's money. They had nothing to gain from the death of Dawn Clark. But Ms. Bassett, she did. Ms. Bassett had her husband sign a power of attorney, giving his $8 million to her. So on the night of August 18th, Ms. Bassett picked up a syringe, injected it in her husband, and killed him. But why? Today, recall the defense's own witness took the stand. On the stand, Mr. Young told you that the only time Ms. Bassett got what she wanted was when her husband disappeared. Because Ms. Bassett knew Dawn Clark was the only thing that stood in her way. So on the night of August 18th, she killed her husband. Members of the jury, it's apparent we have met our burden because we have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Dawn Clark was the only thing that stood in her way. Find Ms. Bassett guilty.
Thank you, counsel. Closing argument for the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? Now, the government just told you that Dawn Clark was the only thing standing in her way. But members of the jury, let me ask you a question. How could Dawn Clark be standing in her way when he was missing? Dawn Clark is missing. The government's evidence is missing as well. You can't create what is missing. And so you can't create proof beyond a reasonable doubt that my client is guilty. Now, today, the government has the burden of proof to you. They must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Kara Bassett murdered Dawn Clark with malice aforethought. Beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest burden in our justice system, meaning that when you go back to deliberate, if you are missing clarity that Kara Bassett committed this crime, then you can't find her guilty. Today you heard from two witnesses, Agent Steph Branham and Joe Young. And of course, what they said was important, but what you need to focus on is what they couldn't say. All the answers to questions that were never asked. Everything that was missing from their testimonies. The first witness you heard from today was Agent Branham, the lead investigator on the case of Dawn Clark's disappearance. And today, Agent Branham told you about the conclusions that Kara Bassett murdered Dawn Clark. But members of the jury, with all the evidence missing, can we even be sure there was a murder? Today you learned from Agent Steph Branham that Mr. Clark's body was never found. She searched the entirety of the Big Gum Swamp, even had trained dogs, but they still never found it in the place they claimed it was dumped. Today you learned that Dawn Clark had a home in Costa Rica that he would go to often. But today you learned that Agent Branham never actually went to Costa Rica. She never investigated it herself. But she told you Dawn Clark wasn't there, based on information she learned from Costa Rican police. But Agent Branham can't tell you the names of these police officers. She can't tell you what search methods they used. And she can't tell you that they were correct. You also heard today how Mrs. Bassett had one text sent to her from Mr. Clark the night he went missing. But after that, he never sent anything else. It said he was going out for a while before his car ended up at the Carrie Bell Leon Airport, where he had a plane and a pilot's license waiting for him. But even if Mr. Clark was actually dead, there is still too much missing evidence for my client to be guilty. Today you learned from Agent Branham that there were several other people who had access to carfentanil, the believed murder weapon in today's case. People besides the defendant who could access that deadly drug. Today you learned that there were several suspects that were never investigated. 2 witnesses at the Elephant Park, 2 people who lived there, couldn't provide alibis. Dawn Clark's son, Phil Clark, couldn't provide an alibi. And Lisa Clark, Dawn Clark's ex-wife, couldn't provide an alibi. Let's talk about Lisa Clark. Today you learned about Lisa. You learned that she was threatening, violent. You learned today that Mr. Clark thought about filing a restraining order against her. But Lisa Clark was never asked any questions. She was never deemed a key suspect. Lisa Clark is completely missing from the government's investigation. The second witness you heard from today was Joe Young. the film producer who worked on filming Kara Bassett for an Elephant Sanctuary documentary. Today, Mr. Young told you how he witnessed Kara Bassett and Don Clark interact, how they were happy, a loving couple. You learned how Kara Bassett grieved after her husband died, after he was gone. And today, Mr. Young told you again about Lisa Clark, threatening and aggressive, but still missing. And all those hours of footage that Mr. Young has, those hours of footage of Kara Bassett, they were never asked for. The government never wanted to look at them during their investigation. That piece of the puzzle is completely missing. The government hasn't met their burden. They can't when they are missing vital details. They are missing evidence such as the investigation of Costa Rica. They are missing physical searches of other suspects. They are missing physical evidence, and they are missing Don Clark's body. Members of the jury, they are missing proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Find Kara Bassett not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. And I believe there's some time left for rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor.
Whenever you're ready.
Don Clark can't stand in her way if he's missing. Members of the jury, that's exactly what the defendant wanted. She wanted her one problem to disappear. Because Don Clark was the only thing that stood in her way. So on the night of August 18th, she killed her husband and got rid of her problem. Because when Miss Bassett's one problem was missing, she finally got her way. Find Miss Bassett guilty.
Okay, thank you, counsel. We just have to make sure that our ballots get filled out now and submitted. And once those are done, everyone should just obviously stay on the line when that's done, and then we'll do some brief comments. So I think we'll get a heads up once everything's been submitted.